There are certain series and movies that you used to watch as a child or teenager, precisely those same movies that you watch today with so much nostalgia. Not necessarily because they're extraordinary, but because they remind us of who we were at that time, and the same thing happens with WWE events, but you know what? That's not the case with WrestleMania 53. In my opinion, this WrestleMania was one of those spectacular shows. Though I feel nostalgic about watching it as a kid, I think it's more than that. It's an incredible event from start to finish. Here, I'll share its story and some interesting facts. To understand WrestleMania 43, just watching it isn't enough. The event from April 1st, 2007, you have to dive into a period of WWE where the company was desperately trying to balance the legacy of the Attitude Era with a new generation of global stars. At the beginning of 2007, WWE was operating under a three-brand system: Raw, SmackDown, and the newly revived ECW. WrestleMania 23 was designed to be the graduation ceremony for this era. The slogan, "All Grown Up," reminded the fans that the kids who watched WrestleMania 13 in 1987 were now adults, and WWE had evolved with them. However, along this journey, the company suffered the loss of its main villain, Triple H, who tore his quadriceps in January at the New Year's Revolution event. And here we get to the difference with today's shows. This injury to Triple H forced the creative team to make a 180-degree turn in their plans for the main event, and they ended up creating an amazing main event. But before we get to that, let's go to another match that started to take shape. And it would be the Battle of the Billionaires. This was, without a doubt, the rivalry that attracted the most media attention outside the world of wrestling. It all started on an episode of Raw where Donald Trump interrupted a night of appreciation for Vince McMahon. Trump, playing the role of a generous tycoon, dropped thousands of dollars from the arena ceiling for the fans, enraging Vince McMahon's character, who, in those years, was selfish and stingy. Vince, obsessed with his hair, challenged Trump to a match. Since neither of them was a wrestler, they chose representatives. Vince chose the Samoan bulldozer Umaga, a beast who was undefeated until then, while Trump picked the ECW champion, Bobby Lashley. To make sure the rules were enforced and to add star power, Stone Cold Steve Austin was appointed as the special referee. The tension rose when Shane McMahon repeatedly tried to interfere to help his father, creating an atmosphere of absolute chaos leading up to the event. But the Blue Brand also had its own story. The Undertaker made history by winning the 2007 Rumble, entering as number 30. And with that, he had the right to choose which champion to face. In an iconic segment on Monday Night Raw, Undertaker stood in front of the three champions, Cena, Lashley, and Batista. After staring intensely at Batista, he grabbed him by the throat, signaling that his target was the World Heavyweight Champion. Unlike other matches on that card, this one wasn't based on personal hatred, but on who was the alpha male. Batista, at the peak of his career, claimed he wasn't afraid of the legend. It was a buildup of unstoppable force against immovable object. On the other hand, WWE was trying to legitimize its version of ICW. That's why they set up ECW Originals versus the New Breed. This match represented the clash between the veterans of the Extreme style, which included Sandman, RVD, Tommy Dreamer, and Sabu, and the young talents that WWE wanted to push. On the other hand, Money in the Bank became the marquee high-risk attraction. The build-up focused on Edge's obsession with staying undefeated at WrestleMania, who up to that point had a record of 5-0. The rise of Mr. Kennedy was also at stake in that match, as he looked poised to be the man who would change the landscape of the company. And regarding the main event, originally the rumors indicated that the plan was Cena vs. Triple H Part 2, since at WrestleMania 22 they had an amazing match. But after the Game's injury, WWE needed a big name, and no one was bigger than Shawn Michaels. In an iconic twist, Cena and Michaels won the Raw Tag Team Championships weeks before WrestleMania. This created a fascinating psychological dynamic, but could they trust each other while preparing to destroy one another for the top title? For weeks, Michaels teased hitting Cena with his signature kick after their tag team matches. On the last Raw before the big event, he finally did it, making it clear that even though they were champions together, at WrestleMania the Heartbreak Kid would show no mercy. To mention some fun facts about the event, we could say that the Mustang John Cena used in his entrance was driven through the streets of Detroit days before as part of a Ford marketing campaign. Months before the event, there were talks for Hogan to face Big Show at WrestleMania in a match similar to the one at WrestleMania 3 that also took place in that city. But they couldn't reach a financial agreement and Hogan was left off the card. If we talk about the stage construction at Ford Field, it should be noted that it started 2 weeks earlier. At that time, it was the largest and most complex television set ever built for a live event. In fact, the WrestleMania 23 set was one of the most expensive to date. It used a number of LED lights and screens that had never been seen before in a football stadium for a wrestling event. There's a beautiful story from this WrestleMania that I'm going to share. Cue the sad music. Lucas was 18 years old and Dylan was 16. They were brothers from the city of Detroit. That day, they didn't have money for tickets, so one of them came up with the idea to go see the superstar as he arrived at the arena. Just seeing them from afar was enough for them and everything was fine. Then they would go home to watch the event. That was their plan for WrestleMania Day. However, a wrestler approached them and told them to hurry to the arena because the show would start in 40 minutes. One of them told him they didn't have tickets and even less money. This wrestler took about $200 out of his wallet so they could buy their tickets. That way, they ran to the box office and bought 2 seats. They enjoyed that unforgettable WrestleMania and the incredible show that took place that night. It turns out that wrestler was Sabu, and this story was told on Reddit by one of the 2 brothers who enjoyed this wonderful event. They shared this story when Sabu died and said they will never forget this deeply human gesture. It turns out that Lucas remembers this story became even more personal because 2 years after WrestleMania 23, his younger brother Dylan passed away. This story is truly admirable, but if we go back to the event, it would start with the 3rd ladder match in WrestleMania history. The participants were an explosive mix: Mr. Kennedy, Edge, CM Punk, Kim Booker, Jeff Hardy, Matt Hardy, Finlay, and Randy Orton. If you ask me, I would sum it up by saying the match was pure physical carnage. The most memorable moment was when Jeff Hardy jumped from a 6-meter ladder onto Edge, who was lying on a horizontal ladder between the ring and the barricade. Both were knocked out, and Mr. Kennedy unhooked the briefcase, since at that time, Kennedy was being projected as the company's next top heel. Although fate, injuries, and suspensions would later deal him a cruel blow. Next is the Great Khali versus Kane. This was a clash of titans, but old school. Although the technical quality was low, the goal was to present Khali as an unstoppable force. The highlight was when Kane managed to hit a scoop slam on Khali, a direct tribute to Hogan's slam heard round the world on Andre the Giant. Next up is the United States Championship match, Chris Benoit versus MVP. An underrated match. Montel Vontavious Porter was on the rise, and Benoit was the veteran in charge of giving him credibility. It was a 10-minute technical match, ending with Benoit's devastating headbutt. As a side note, this would be Benoit's last WrestleMania before the tragedy in June of that same year. The Undertaker versus Batista. Many critics doubted this match. It was thought that Batista was too wooden, and Taker was too much of a veteran. However, they stole the show. It was a match of brute strength. Batista survived a chokeslam and a last ride, while Taker survived a Batista bomb. With a tombstone piledriver, the score went up to 15-0, and this match is considered today as one of the best in Batista's career. And now we move on to what would be the hook for the non-wrestling fan audience. The premise was simple. Donald Trump and Vince McMahon put their hair on the line. The representatives were Bobby Lashley for Trump and Umaga for Vince. Stone Cold as the referee guaranteed there would be stunners for everyone. Shane McMahon interfered, but it wasn't enough. After Lashley's victory, the world witnessed a surreal image. The most powerful man in wrestling tied to a chair, being covered with shaving cream by the current president of the United States and an ECW wrestler, while his head was being completely shaved. And now, we move on to the women's match. In 2007, WWE's women's division was in a transitional phase after legends like Trish Stratus and Lita retired the previous year. The company was looking for new faces who could carry the marketing load. Melina was the perfect antagonist, and Ashley Massaro, who had won the 2005 Diva Search, didn't have a deep technical background, but she had an undeniable connection with the youth thanks to her punk rock look. And her recent appearance obviously on the cover of Playboy magazine.
Damn, what an offer.
To make sure almost every woman on the roster had her moment on the biggest stage of all, WWE surrounded the ring with lumberjills. The participants were Mickie James, Victoria, Kelly, Tori Wilson, Maria Kanellis, Layla, and Candice Michelle. This guaranteed a chaotic environment and prevented Melina from escaping with her championship. Ashley Massaro worked in this match with an ankle injury that she suffered weeks earlier, which limited her even more in the ring. Despite this, WWE kept the match due to the major advertising deal tied to her Playboy appearance. However, Melina would be the one to retain her title and win the match. And now we move on to the main event, the icon versus the face of the company. The narrative was youth versus experience. Michaels entered with a classic version of his music while Cena crashed through a glass wall in a Mustang. It was a long match, almost 30 minutes of pure storytelling. Michaels worked on Cena's leg and Cena showed his resilience. All this while, there had been speculation weeks before that Michaels, that very year, was not getting along with Cena at all. In the end, the STF forced the Heartbreak Kid to submit, consolidating Cena not only as a marketing phenomenon, but also as a wrestler capable of delivering 5-star matches. Rumors said that Michaels left quite upset with Cena and that he didn't want to shake his hand after the match. But don't pay attention, they're just rumors. So to describe WrestleMania 23 from the heart, you have to set aside the statistics and the million-dollar contracts. You have to think back to the child or teenager we were on April 1st, 2007, who sat in front of the TV to watch their heroes become legends. Maybe many weren't even born yet, but there was a night in Detroit where time seemed to stand still under the Silver Dome of Ford Field. It wasn't just a wrestling event, it was the roar of more than 80,000 voices claiming their right to believe in the impossible. WrestleMania 23 wasn't just about growing up, it was a reminder that even as the years go by, the sense of wonder remains alive inside us. Before this video ends, remember to let me know which event you'd like to see in this new section of the channel, where we'll go over its history and interesting facts. Remember to subscribe, and with that said, thank you very, very much.